just to be interested, just pay attention to how things work and just get involved in as many conversations as possible, really. Ideas, any discussions that are happening about why we're doing things and how we want to do things, just trying to get involved in those, and so you can start having a voice in that kind of process, I think, really.
Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Sue Highmoor, Documentation Manager at UKCloud. Welcome, Sue, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for inviting me along.
Fantastic, Sue. So just before I start pouring my questions in, please help me understand a little bit more about yourself and how did you get into this documentation career?
Well, okay, we have to go quite a way back for that. So I've been in documentation now for, I think, getting on for 30 years now. But it all really started at school. I went to quite a traditional all-girls school, and I was actually there the year I did my GCSEs was the first year of GCSEs. So a while ago, and being a traditional school, they didn't do a lot of technical things. I was fairly early days in the industry as well. But it just so happened that year they ran a couple of Cambridge certificate courses in IT. And I decided to go for those. And that then led on to me taking a computer science degree. And during that process, I realized that I wasn't really cut out to be a programmer or kind of be involved in that side. But when I did my final year project, I realized that I loved that bit of it, the bit at the end where, as well as building the product, you then also had to write about it. And it was a fairly significant part of the coursework part of the degree was to actually create a report at the end of it that talked about the thing that you created. And I realized that I really enjoyed doing that side of it. So that kind of was what prompted me then to, when I was looking for my first job outside of university, was to look at technical writing jobs. So that's kind of how it happened for me. And I've been there ever since. So
yes, so you have over 25 years of experience as a technical author. So first of all, I'm very impressed and congratulations for sticking to one field for many years. And that also leads me to the next question. In what ways has the role of a technical writer evolved over these years or time?
Well, I'd say obviously my first job, it was very much about printed material. So it was all about creating user guides, actual physical books. For the first part of my career was very much about that, and the printing process being a big part of it. But since then, obviously, it's then moved on, and jobs afterwards, there was a lot of online help aspect of it, and providing the documentation within the product rather than having to go outside to a book. And obviously now everything is more online and having to find ways of making the documentation accessible. So it's a big change from printed material down to what we have now, where it's HTML pages and people are accessing online. And adding even more different types of media in as well, like creating videos and all that kind of thing as well. So definitely
how did it really feel when you held your first book with your own writing? And because for me, reading a book gives me a different experience than reading through electronic means. So I just want to know, how did it feel for you when you saw your first output in your own hands?
Definitely a great feeling. And I think even my name was there in the front. And
yes.
I believe I probably still have a copy of that first one that I ever created in a box at home somewhere. So yeah, to have that physical thing in your hand that that you were, a significant part of creating, it's a good feeling.
Super. So last fall, you transitioned from technical author to documentation manager at UKCloud?
Yep.
So prior to this, you had only ever worked as a technical author. So how was this transition for you?
Well, so that's kind of happened because a large portion of my career was spent in a very large corporation, where I was a small cog in a massive machine of technical publications, and so the focus very much there was on all the kind of background stuff was done by a separate department, and you accessed all of that, the templates and the processes and all that was kind of determined for you. And then when I moved to UKCloud, I am the technical writer. I was the technical writer, the first technical writer that they'd had. I'm the only technical writer that they had. So although my role when I first joined was really just to make sure that we had the documentation, more of a process behind it, and all that. It's certainly, as I've worked here, I've taken on more and more responsibilities in terms of driving the strategic direction of what we want to do with the documentation. Part of that being taking what we did have, which was a bunch of PDF documents that were served out of our portal, and someone had to log in to get to them, into the knowledge center that we have today, which is all online. It's it's out there on the internet and anyone can access. So definitely the role shifted towards, as well as creating the content, making the decisions behind the content and the type of content that we're creating and how we deliver it.
So any advices you would suggest for somebody who wants to become a documentation manager at one day, and having a similar transition, Sue?
I guess just to be interested, just pay attention to how things work, and just get involved in as many conversations as possible, really. Ideas, any discussions that are happening about why we're doing things and how we want to do things, just trying to get involved in those, and so you can start having a voice in that kind of process, I think, really.
Mm-hmm. True, very true. So get involved at the early stages,
Yeah.
and be more active in the delivery process. Super. Again, so let's talk a little bit more about your engagement process in UKCloud and your documentation processes, and towards the pieces of contents you'll be delivering. So what's the process like, Sue?
So the process is we'll get a request in from somewhere, and the requests can come in from any number of places. So we'll get a request for a piece of documentation, and then it can vary. Sometimes it will be, I've got this document that I want to put up on the Knowledge Center, and it will be a fairly well-formed piece of content that just requires some editing and a general look over, make sure it follows our standards and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's just, we need to document this thing, and then I'll be much more involved in creating the content of that, and having conversations with subject matter experts to figure out what the thing is, how it works, and then hopefully get access to it so that you can have a play around with it, which I think is always a key thing. So then creating that content or editing that content, and then it goes through a review process to make sure that anything that I've created has that kind of sanity check, to make sure that we're saying the right thing and we've got it right. And then it's published, and then once it's published, not forgetting that once it's out there, you do have to keep track of it, and you do have to make sure that you go back to it regularly to make sure that you're keeping it current and up to date, which I think is a very key part of the process.
Great. So by the way you describe the process, do you involve with a number of teams while creating these contents, or how does the workflow look like?
So yeah, it can be from anyone across the business, really. Mostly it comes out of the technical teams, because they might be updating a feature, or adding a new service or product, or making changes, fixing bugs even, and it will come from a technical team. Some of it can come from within the support organization, for example, if there's been something that customers are particularly struggling over, or there's been bugs raised, and they feel that documentation would help to alleviate that problem for future customers. So they're coming from the customer services team as well. They can even come in from the commercial team, or even the sales team, or anything. So it's definitely, I have contact with almost every part of the business, really. Yeah.
Nice. So again, given the ample amount of experience you have in the space, and you have delivered a wide variety of documentation throughout your career, what's your favorite type and why?
I love doing step-by-step instructions, just that process that takes somebody from, they want to know how to do something, and then creating that process that breaks it down into each step and takes them through from beginning to end. And then hopefully, they had a question, they wanted to be able to do something, and then by reading the doc, they've figured it out, and it's told them how to get it done. I always feel like really people don't go to the documentation unless they're struggling, they're having a problem, they want to find something out, and to feel like I've got someone back on track and got them over that hurdle and got them on with their day as quickly as possible. Those are the kind of things that I like creating. And I'm finding these days as well, I'm trying to branch out a little bit and do that more in a video format as well, to just kind of address people's different ways of learning. So I'm trying to do a similar thing, but in a kind of showing rather than a telling way, I suppose.
Great. So being more innovative and exploring new ideas.
Yeah, exactly. I try to think, if I have a question, if I have something that I want to find out about, how do I do it? What approach do I take for it? And in a lot of those cases, when you're wanting to find out how to do something, you will turn to a video to show you exactly what to do. So True. Definitely, I feel that our documentation will benefit from increasing the amount of videos that we provide. For sure.
Right. So just coming from my previous question, again, over all these years of you being as a documentation author, what's been the most important innovation when it comes to document tracking?
I guess one of the things that we did with our knowledge center was as I said before, when we moved it out of the portal that we have, and kind of converted it into more, I guess it's docs as code, right, where you're creating markdown files and that's going into like a source control system, which has been incredible for us in terms of being able to track changes, make changes, roll them back, and definitely have that level of knowing exactly what's happened and having approval processes all kind of baked in has been great. Has been a great innovation, I think, in terms of rather than having manually track Word documents or however you used to create them, or FrameMaker files or whatever.
Yeah, and it also helps you become more process oriented and more structured, right?
Yeah.
Great. One thing we didn't talk a lot is the nature of your documentation. Is it publicly available, or is it something only a signed user can have access to?
Yeah, today it's publicly accessible. It did, as I said before, it did used to be behind a login screen to get in our portal, but yeah, now it is completely publicly available, which shows up on our analytics. Actually, I think.
Oh, fantastic!
I think I made a note. Almost 80% of our traffic, I think, comes from organic search rather than being linked to from a direct link or anything. So yeah, our documentation's out there and people are accessing, which is incredible to see.
Great experience. Great. So with these questions, I'm done with my generic questions, but I have a couple more questions which is more focused on rapid fire round basis. So are we good to go to that section?
Yep, absolutely.
So who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
I saw this question and it's, I find these types of questions so difficult. I infuriate my daughter. My daughter asks me all the time, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? And I'm like, I can't tell you a favorite. I get so much out of so different ones. So I just feel like the approach is you learn from everybody. You learn from everyone that you work with, right from my first job when I knew nothing and I was learning everything, to moving from a fairly small company into a big company and then having to learn how to work with all these big processes and lots of standards and all that kind of thing. And then going on into this current role that I have now, where I had to learn so much more beyond the scope of just writing and learn, as I say, all those strategic things. So I can't answer a particular one. It's to everybody. I think everyone's contributed.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I expected you to mention as well, because there's not one person you can think and say thank you, right? So thank you to everyone who's been part of Sue's development and progress.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you might be reading a lot of contents over the web or physically. So can you share some documentation related resource you have consumed recently?
Yeah, well, I'm quite an avid Googler, so I do go in and whenever I want to know something, that's always my first port of call. I fairly recently created the UKCloud style guide, and I kind of found in that process that I am quite an instinctual grammarian in terms of it sounds right to me, but without necessarily knowing what was the grammar rule that means that sounds right to me. So I use Grammarly quite a bit. Then trying to, when I was writing all these bits and pieces in the style guide to justify these decisions that I was driving in terms of how we would do particular things. And the thing I liked about Grammarly was that it does quite often point out differences between American and UK English. So it was always good to spot those. So I used that quite a lot in the process of creating our style guide.
Okay, thank you for that useful resource, Sue. My last question is, what is the one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, that would be to be persistent, because I think you get various responses, I think, as a technical writer when you're asking people, because obviously you have to ask people to do things for you and to help you out with stuff. You need to ask people to help you create content. You need to ask people to help you review content and then go over that content again later on when you're having to check it to make sure it's still accurate. So be persistent, because everyone's busy and everyone has different priorities, and doc isn't always the top priority for everybody. So I guess be persistent and recognize that the role that you play in the business is as important as anyone else's, and you're worth the role that you do is worth other people's time. So have that persistence to keep asking, have you looked at that yet? Please take a look at that. And don't worry about the fact that you're annoying people by nagging them constantly, which I think is a big role in a technical writer's life.
That's really sweet. Thank you for that encouraging words, Sue. More than an advice, it sounds very promising and very encouraging to young generation who wants to take this as a career. Super. So have I missed to ask anything in particular from you, or is there anything you would like to share with our audiences today?
I don't think so. I mean, I think in terms of the technology that we're using these days, we're using, say we moved our documentation into GitHub, which I think has been an amazing thing for us in terms of being able to make the documentation more widely available. And again, with that process behind it and the source control and the approvals and all that has been a great resource for us. So that was definitely a good move for us, moving our doc into GitHub.
All right, super. So thank you once again for sharing your experience with us today. And definitely there are a lot of takeaways that we should remember from this episode. And good luck with your managerial role, and more successes to come in the coming days.
Thank you very much. It was really nice to talk about the whole thing. It's nice to have the opportunity to talk about these. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.